The recipe for feeling amazing is actually all of those simple little things, but you have to find the ability, the want, the desire in yourself to investigate and dedicate time to those little things for them to make a big impact on yourself.
The key that we're all looking for is to be consistently good, not occasionally great. Sometimes they know the right question and you don't.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's not about finding the right answer, it's actually asking the right question.
Life feels so much better being able to say no when, you're not thinking about people pleasing. But just because something's the right call for you doesn't mean it's easy.
Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences in strength, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm Michael Kurkowski, host of the Strength Connection, and I'm so grateful that you can join me today. So in these episodes, I connect with some of the most inspiring and successful individuals to chop it up and learn from true life experiences that have helped them become who they are, the strongest versions of themselves. One of the greatest ways I've always learned the most important lessons is through stories. We all have them, and they make us who we are. So let's dive in. Here we go. In this episode, I'm joined once again by an incredible coach and woman, Colleen Conlon, Guinness World Record holder and the author of Kettlebell Catalyst. In my first time connecting with Colleen, we talked a lot about her journey physically and becoming the person and coach she is, but in this one, it was a bit different. Colleen talked very openly about the past year and both the challenges and triumphs she's found in her mental and spiritual strength, much of which came from deeply uncomfortable moments. I truly love connecting with Colleen because she's continually aiming up in all aspects of her life, regardless of whether it's easy or whether it's difficult. I enjoyed this conversation from start to finish. Time absolutely flew by, which is why we ended it by saying we need to continue it again very soon. All right, so with that, we're going to get right to it. Before we do, please show your support for the show. Make sure you subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you're listening. And also check us out on our YouTube channel, The Strength Connection. Your support means everything to me, guys. I sincerely appreciate you. All right, thanks so much. Now let's get on with the show. Colleen Conlon, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I think I'm a little bit more excited to have this conversation today than even the past one that we had.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we had an awesome conversation. It was about almost a year ago that we chatted. I saw it was episode 101. If anybody wants to go back and listen to the last time me and Colleen jammed, but this is almost 200 now. So it's been a journey and a half. So thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you waking up and spending some of the morning with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, we had our podcast about a year ago, which was awesome. Got to hear all about your journey, the work that you do, the Guinness World Record. I mean, all that awesome stuff. And it was a blast. But then a couple months ago, we had a conversation about a framework, a little bit of what we're going to talk about today on the mental side and energy. But you said something I wanted to preference when we talked. I was like, I really do love following your content and your work. And then you threw it back at me. You're like, can I ask why? And I don't think I gave you a really great answer to that. So I was like, actually, I thought of it afterwards. I'm one of those people, if I get a question that stumps me a little bit, I was like, why do I follow Colleen? What is it? And I think what it is you have a great way of showing that you're aiming up in life. And I think as coaches, especially online, it could be very easy. Like we're trying to almost say the same thing, but in a different way, make it sound a little bit, cooler, but we kind of stay in our own box. You really show from not only the work that you do in strength training and kettlebells, but just life in general with gratitude, with, exploring your own learning. You really show that, yeah, I'm trying to find more things about life, not just about my vocation. And I personally think I'm trying to do the same thing. So I gel, there's a synergy in there, but I thought that was a little better answer. And I wanted to start this off with that.
I love your answer. And I really appreciate getting to hear that. And yeah, I mean, I'm 30 and I feel like, at the beginning of January, I decided this was going to be the year to really work on finding myself. I think a lot of times, in like a traditional sense, kid goes off to college or a kid takes a gap year or a kid, is out of parents' house and like, that's the time to find themselves. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really get that opportunity. I lived a really sheltered lifestyle growing up. And I ended up getting into like a huge fight with my dad in December. And that's kind of what sprung me to the idea that like I need to take this time and really get to know myself in a bigger way than just Colleen, the girl with the golden kettlebells. Like there's so much more to explore. And a lot of the things that I'm sure we're going to talk about, I wouldn't say that, you know, January was the beginning of exploring that stuff, but January was the start of exploring everything in a bigger way. Like right before we started recording this call, Mike had asked if there were people who have kind of like influenced the stuff around the energy and some of the spiritual stuff. And there has been influence. There's been like little breadcrumbs that the universe has kind of scattered over the past few years. But it was really this past January that I decided, okay, this is the time we got to go on an adventure. We are going to explore and learn more about the self and learn more about what the universe has in store when we start to check in more with the mental and emotional and energetic components of ourselves, because I think that's stuff that really gets overlooked. And what I'm learning is that it really shouldn't. It plays such a big role. And I used to be one of those people like scrolling on social media when I would see any type of a post about like mental health or like go meditate, go take a breath, go drink some water, like go journal. I'd be like, this is bullshit. Like,
fuck off. Yeah.
How can any of this stuff help? Like, it seems so simple, but it's almost as if the recipe for feeling amazing is actually all of those simple little things, but you have to find the ability, the want, the desire in yourself to investigate and dedicate time to those little things for them to make a big impact on yourself.
We'll get right back to this episode, but first I want to tell you about Nabosu Technology. Nabosu is the leading company in foot care products created by the top functional podiatrist and human movement specialist, Dr. Emily Splickle and her team. Our feet are a connection to the earth and the foundation of all human movement, and it's often the most overlooked part of our body when it comes to health, fitness, and recovery. Personally, I never thought much of how the foot impacts my movement and strength until years ago when I found my intense sciatic pain I was dealing with was coming from a locked up midfoot and ankle issue. So after putting emphasis on this, my pain subsided completely, and since then I've made sure to take care of my feet before anything else in training. I use the Nabosu NeuroBall every day, whether I'm training or not, and I felt significantly better in both my barefoot strength training as well as running outside on grass and on pavement. Nabosu has the best products on the market, including the NeuroBall, recovery socks, splays, activation insoles, and the kinesis boards and mats. So to check out Nabosu Technology, click on the link in the comments or go to nabosutechnology.com and use the code CONNECTION and get an additional 10% off your purchase. Again, that's the code CONNECTION. Use it to get 10% off. All right, now let's get back to it.
And I think that can be a really hard thing in our society because we're so used to, you know, instant gratification, using phones, having the internet, just like everything happens very fast. And in developing these practices that can get you more in tune with yourself, it's not instant. And you're not necessarily going to get a quick and very clear answer. All of the answers are within ourselves. And it's a matter of being able to check in with yourself and not judge yourself, that I think allows for a person to have a better understanding of self and being able to show up bigger and better in the world.
It's interesting. As you were talking there, I heard this quote came into my mind. Someone says like the key that we're all looking for is to be consistently good, not occasionally great. And I think in our world, like we see highlights all the times of things, big accolades, big things that are getting all the attention and all the, you know, the fun, you know, connections there, which are like the occasionally great moments, but they only build up from the consistently good moments. And consistently good doesn't feel the same. Like it doesn't, like everybody knows a PR that they hit in the gym. Like that's a day that you remember. But the only way that you get there and you consistently keep doing that is by those little good things over and over again. But it's a challenging thing when you talk about finding yourself. I think it's one of those phrases that we kind of understand what you're saying, right? But everybody's full description or definition of that is going to be different. So if you can bring me on that journey a little bit more before January, you said it's kind of breadcrumbs that built up from here. What was that? Was there a final tipping point or something that made you jump over the line of being like, no, this is where I need to put my energy into exploring myself a lot deeper?
Yeah. So I grew up in a very conservative Catholic household. And I remember like as a kid, I had like a fascination with like magic. And I remember like one Halloween, I wanted to be a fortune teller. And I remember that just like got shut down instantaneously.
Blasphemy, blasphemy.
Exactly. Exactly. And I was very much that quote unquote good girl growing up. I listened to my parents. I was not very rebellious. And that kind of just like trickled into my 20s, like my relationship with my parents. They still had a lot of reign and power over me. And in December, I got into such a big blowout with my dad that I finally came to the conclusion that, you know, my beliefs are very different than my parents. And I have been living a life with them in the back of my head, thinking that, oh, certain things are supposed to be a certain way. Not even necessarily about religion or politics, but even just like how we value relationships with each other. And that's when I decided I can't do what I'm doing anymore. And I remember coming home from visiting them at Christmas, and I haven't been that upset in a really long time. Like, it was so hard to work out. I didn't want to do anything. I was just crying. And I remember I went with a friend to get my aura photographed. And the reading that the woman gave back to me was that you're really shut down right now. You have so many barriers up. Like, you're probably going to be a bit of like a boundary queen for a while, which is fine. Like, it's important to set these boundaries up. And that's something even worth talking about now, not to pivot away from this too much. But past 6 months, I don't think I've really started to adopt the phrase of no, even to things that sound, you know, fun and exciting, but it's not helping me with all of my goals. And that's been a cool thing to just witness and experience. I want to just like bookmark that because I really want to come back to it.
Sure. Yeah, please.
With this tipping point. But I remember thinking to myself, the first week of January, I get one life, and I can either live my life for other people or I can live my life for myself. And at the end of the day, as much as, you know, I would love to make my parents happy with everything that I do, I'm going to make Colleen happy. So that's when I decided it's time to start exploring some different ideas, things that might seem kind of, you know, taboo to them, but really like they light me up and I'm excited about them. I remember even like growing up, oh my gosh. Okay. Every Sunday we're at church, doesn't matter. I remember like anytime I was in the hospital for surgeries, we're either bringing the priest into the hospital or we're somehow like bringing Colleen to church. We do not miss church, right? Not in my family. And Mike, I can't even tell you one time that I was at church where I didn't fall asleep. And that's not like an over exaggeration. I remember eventually leaving the Catholic Church. My husband, not Catholic, he found God on his own and he started going to a non-denominational Christian church. And even there, when I would go with him. I'm just like dozing off. Like I can't stay awake.
Yeah.
It's almost like the universe is just like, you're not supposed to get the download. And I've started exploring more things around, tarot cards and oracle cards, and just like tapping into myself and what the universe has to share. And like, I've never felt more excited about, listening to these messages in a different way. Which is really cool. And I think, it's been something very intriguing and worth exploring, because if you're, in one situation and you just like can't hear the message, you show up every week, but like something keeps disconnecting you, but you can show up for a spiritual practice in a slightly different way, and you're excited and you're wide awake. Like clearly, in my opinion, this other thing is meant for you.
That's, it's interesting. The journey of kind of self-exploration on the spiritual front of it, it's such a personal thing. And it's so hard to, at first we adopt our parents or whoever raises us, we adopt their belief systems. We don't know any better as kids. It's like you just go on, you're just figuring out the world and you're just establishing it. But eventually there comes that point where you recognize, as you said it there, it's like you have one life. Like I need to do what's best for me. I think it's an old proverb that says everybody gets two lives. The second one starts when you realize you only have one.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. And it's a very powerful thing. And like one of my great friends and mentors who introduced me to the Tao, which has just resonated very much with me. I think the important message is like, wherever you find like where your path is, it's like, if it aligns with you, like that's the right thing. I think we can get so easily into this, zealot type world of like, well, this is what I believe, so everybody has to believe it. It's like God reveals himself in a million different ways, in a million different directions to people. But kind of going on that part of the power of no, which I do want to bring you to in there. Do you think, I'm curious about this because I've personally experienced this myself. Do you think this has been a big revelation for you because your vision is a little bit more clear maybe than it has been before of what you want for your life, or kind of what aligns with you?
I think I'm still on the path of figuring out exactly what it is that I want. Can you repeat the first part of your question again?
Going into saying no, I think when we really align with that and we're comfortable with saying no to something, even if it seems exciting and something like that, when it is, it's because we know that even though it might be exciting, it might be a fun thing to do, it doesn't align with like the vision of what we have, or like we only have so much energy throughout the day to put into certain things. I guess the main point of my question is it feel easier now, or maybe a little bit more, I guess easy is the best way to say no to those things, because you feel like you've grown a lot in this time, or you're aligned more into the vision of what you want to bring into your own life?
Absolutely. I think just being able to practice the word no is a really big deal. It's the same way like practicing, reps for a snatch. It's not going to be perfect on the first time. There's a lot of different things that we're kind of thinking about, but eventually we get to a point where we can just be asked a question and we can give the answer of yes or no. Life feels so much better being able to say no when, you're not thinking about people pleasing. And I think people pleasing is a really dangerous thing. And I think we get super caught up being like, well, I don't want them to judge me. I don't want them to be upset with me. We project so much of what we assume somebody's going to think and feel, when half the time people don't really care. Like, even if I ask like a girlfriend, do you want to go get something to eat? Do you want to go work out? Do you want to go get nails done? And they say no. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do it anyways by myself, or I'll ask somebody else. But like, I'm not mad at you. Like, you got to do what you got to do. But I think it's really hard for a lot of people. But in practicing it, and I think something else that really helped at the beginning of the year, I didn't realize how much weight I had gained last year. I remember, so I started working with a registered dietitian a little over 2 years ago. And I started working with her initially because my book was coming out. I was getting ready to do a photo shoot. I noticed I gained weight during the pandemic. I was like, if I'm going to, have this book come out, like, I really want to feel good. Like, the book's going to be here forever.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I remember working so hard to like follow her guidelines. We were counting macros. And after the photo shoot, I remember like I have the most incredible clients. I could not be more grateful for the people that I get to work with. They are truly incredible. Something that I struggle with is saying no to clients. Be it saying no on days where I really do need to take the time and rest and not give away energy, like accepting to take on sessions, or clients coming out to visit me and being like, can I stay with you? And I ended up having some visitors last year. I ended up taking on sessions during times where, it's great to be able to help people. It's great even to, bring in additional cash flow. But I really needed to have said no. And I was afraid of saying no because I didn't want to ruin these relationships. Mm-hmm. Again, me projecting on them. I'm sure it would have been fine. But anyways, so I started gaining the weight back because I was using food as an outlet for comfort. So we come back to January and I got in this, again, huge fight with my dad. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I was just like, I was so upset. I was like, I worked so hard to lose this COVID weight and now it's back. Why is it back? I'm training hard. At this point, I've already started incorporating the barbell. Everyone's telling me, use the barbell, Colleen, like it's going to make a huge difference. And I'm just like, I don't feel.
Everybody's got a solution to it. Yeah.
Right? So I remember reconnecting. I hadn't stopped, but the registered dietitian I work with, she was like, okay, if you want to go into another cut phase, enough time has gone past, we can do this. And this is your time frame that we can like go hard. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this again. I saw that I could do this once. I'm going to do it again. And I refuse to let anything get in my way this time so that this continues to be like a cyclical cycle. So I decided I'm going to say no. If people want to, go out to eat, I don't want to go out to eat. I would rather have a game night with you. I would rather go for a hike with you. Right now, I need to be focused on my macros. It's not forever, but right now, this is what I need. Or if people are asking, oh, can we go away this weekend? You can go away. I'm going to stay and I'm going to get my sleep. I'm going to get my workout. Or we can leave at a different time so I can get my sleep and I can get my workout. I have been so used to being the person who goes with the flow and lets other people run the show. And I've decided, no, I'm going to be the one who runs my show. And if it doesn't work for somebody else, I understand. And they're going to continue to do what they're going to do. And maybe they do it with somebody else. But for me right now, I need to, get the reps in flexing the word no. And I feel like in doing so, it's helped in a tremendous way. I'm the strongest I've ever been. And I would say from an aesthetic standpoint, I'm the leanest I've ever been in a healthy way. And it feels amazing. And because I'm rested, I'm hydrated, I'm fueled, like I just feel better in my day-to-day. But part of the reason that's all been able to happen is because I'm saying no. And I think, my shadow self is thinking like, oh, you're being so selfish. Like you're putting yourself before other people. Nobody's going to you have to put yourself first. Nobody else is going to put you first all of the time. So I think until people realize that you are a priority. You need to stand up for you.
Mhm.
It's gonna, like, things aren't gonna change the same way. I recently changed my phone screensaver. I'll show this to you, Mike. Nobody else can see, but that's me at
Mhm.
5.
Okay.
I keep a 5-year-old picture of myself on the screen to remind myself that, like, you got to take care of her.
Mhm. Ooh,
Because
that's powerful.
nobody else
Yeah.
is going through the same way.
Mhm. There's a lot in there that I want to unpack. I think what you said about we just said about the shadow self and saying no. It's kind of like with buy-in of health and fitness, where it's like you need to, once you start to see the journey and you start to see the results of the work that you're putting in, then all of a sudden you get that buy-in. It's a different energy. It's like a switch that turns over. I used to talk about this when I managed a club, where I would see the differences of how people walked in like a couple months after they started and they're doing really well. They were like shuffling their feet. It was like a kind of tentative walk in because it was very scary. But then once they started to feel it, you see the posture change in them. And I would bring it up to them all the time, like, you're walking different as you come in here now. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, I know you're doing well because I can see it in your walk. It's the body language. And I relate that to the power of no is when you realize you say no for the first time or two, and you're like, I'm used to being that person. I'm used to helping other people or being that people pleaser because it feels good. You feel like you're needed. You feel like your energy is needed by somebody. But then you realize that life still goes on and they're okay, even though I said no, and you're doing your own stuff. It does get easier as you go along, I'm sure.
I
So,
think so.
yeah. So back in January, when you going into this year and you started really establishing, like learning, you said like things like your aura, getting into tarot cards. Did you feel like, was this a different feeling that you had of like alignment of another side of you, like right away? Like, did you immediately feel like, oh, I'm on a different track right now? And if it was, what is that feeling like if you could describe it?
It feels like coming home to myself. Like I told you at the beginning, like, I really wanted to be a fortune teller for Halloween. So being able to explore this stuff without, a parent being like, you can't do this. It felt almost like, felt a little scary. It felt like, should I really be doing this? But it felt like, oh, this is home. This is the stuff that I like have always just had a pull towards, and now I'm exploring it, and it really resonates. Yeah, it's that simple. It feels like coming home.
Did you see a change at all of not only your relationship with yourself, but your relationship with your husband or with your clients, even the conversations that you had? Was there a shift at all in how you responded or reacted with other people?
Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily from all the tarot card stuff. I think
Mhm.
the tarot stuff to an extent, sure. I joined a container. With this woman named Taylor Simpson, who is like all about how do I describe her? She's very much divine feminine energy and understanding how to tap into that, and helping other women tapping into that. Because when we're able to connect to that, life changes. Taylor would describe like making money, for example, as a very like feminine act. Money is feminine energy.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, can you repeat the specific question? Because now all I'm thinking about is like Taylor and money and like
The change in not only the change with the connection to yourself, but the change in connecting with other people.
I think my husband would describe me definitely as different at this point. I have clients who like will talk more about like the woo-woo stuff. Like I'll pull cards for clients before sessions now, which is interesting. There's something that was already happening within the circle of me and some longer standing clients. We've had a conversation around human design for almost 2 years now. So I'm connecting deeper to that. So human design is it's like a whole mishmash of things. But basically we're taking like astrology and genetics and biology and quantum physics, and basically like laying out this blueprint of how to live your life in alignment based on those things that I just listed in studies. So I'm able to connect to some of those clients who are already interested in those things in a different way. So there's a lot of talk around like, how do I know if this is the right choice for me? Like, for example, I have a client who's a manifesting generator and she has a Splenic Authority. And I know right now, anybody listening to this who's never heard of human design, they're like, what the fuck is she talking about?
Is that?
But basically, like this client, the way her human design works for her to make decisions, she gets like this little voice, this like little feeling from her spleen. And if she acts on it, like that's her only opportunity. This client specifically listened to her Splenic Authority and decided to leave New York City and move across the country. She's now my neighbor in Arizona. Mine, for example, I'm a generator and my authority is all around waiting for clarity. So I would say prior to this, I was the type of person, I would just make decisions like that out of snap. There we go. And now what I'm purposefully doing is sitting with questions that are posed to me, like not super simple things like, what do you want to eat today? But I'm sitting with certain things to just continue to check in. How do I feel about it? How do I feel about it today? How do I feel about it tomorrow before making a big decision? And I would say that's definitely been helpful, especially around things that are just harder. I've already shared getting into this big fight with my dad.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to make a decision that we're just not going to have a relationship for a little while. And that was a really hard conversation to have. And that required me to really like sit and think, is this the right thing to do right now? And for me, I believe, yeah, it is the right thing to do. It was the right call to make. But just because something's the right call for you doesn't mean it's easy.
Yes, exactly. I think that's such an important point, because when you sit and you marinate on these things, the big questions that we have, it's not something that, you just immediately get the right answer. It's like crystal clear. No, there's still some muddy waters. It's like, that's where it's kind of like understanding your RPE scale in training. Like, to know the difference between a 1 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10 is pretty easy. To know the difference between a 6 and a 7 out of 10, that's going to take some time. Like, it's going to be like a different type of energy that you have. But, talking about different things, like with the organs, like this woman with the spleen and stuff, like a year or so ago, I would have been so skeptical and called bullshit on it in some ways. Then after talking to like Sifu Singh, who got me into mind boxing and Tai Chi program and stuff. And he's amazing, but his program goes into a lot of work with sound therapy and different sounds that we make.
You connected with Chris Holder?
Yeah, I've talked with Chris before too. Yeah.
Is this the same person that he works with?
Yeah, Chris and Sifu work together and with Castro, with Kettlebell Partner Passing and work there. So after doing that work and actually feeling the differences of our body, there's something the body is such a crazy place to live, and we see it so much from a 10,000 foot view at all times. When you actually go into these things and understand how your individual body works a lot more, you're going to get these answers, and they might not be understood by anybody else at all, like who might just not really be in tune with this. And I think that's probably one of the toughest parts of exploring these things, is knowing that, yeah, you might be really misunderstood by a lot of other people around you, maybe some of the closest people that are in your connection. Could be your parents, it could be your best friends, it could be people that you've known for a long time. And that's kind of like an act of courage to actually go and explore these things.
Yeah. I think so much of society, they're not awake. They're asleep. And it's because I think it really comes back to the shadow self, and society as a whole, just kind of dimming the light and almost telling us like the things that we feel that we can't explain, like intuition, for example. It can't be explained. So like, we're just going to mute it. It doesn't matter. So people end up just like turning into cogs in the wheel of, corporate society. And we never really get a full opportunity to explore who we are, especially if we're not around people who are awake from like a conscious standpoint, who are exploring these other things. I think one of my favorite things about social media is being able to see people regularly who do things differently, and seeing what they do, especially this woman that I was talking about, this container I'm in, it's called Untamed. Watching this woman like dancing like crazy, it makes me feel like, oh, well, if she can do this, like I have the permission to do it as well. Not that anybody needed to give me permission, but sometimes it's just easier to try things that we don't always see routinely in society, once we see one other person do it.
Yeah, because what are you seeing from that person, right? You're seeing authenticity.
You are. And I think a lot of times some of these more like woo-woo things, it's fun. It's, at least for me, it's something that I really have been enjoying exploring. But there is a time and a place where I feel like a pioneer. For me, like everything with kettlebells, Instagram, like creating my business, I've very much felt like a pioneer. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, because for whatever reason, I don't know how to figure it out on my own. Like I need the guide. I really need the guide. So having somebody like her explaining things, I mean, she talks about energy as well, talking about the masculine and the feminine. It's just, even with a kettlebell, like to an extent, can you self-teach yourself? Sure. But when you hire the coach who can answer the questions and troubleshoot and give you the explanations, it just makes it easier to absorb the information.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I've had coaching forever. And I've often asked too, it's like, why do I love my coaches so much? I've had some of them, one of my coaches has been with me for 12 years. And it's like, why do we still align so much every day? And oftentimes, I think it's not just I trust the guidance and I trust like what he's telling me, but it's also sometimes they know the right question and you don't.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's not about finding the right answer. It's actually asking the right question. And as you said there, like exploring these things it's fun. And I think when we all align, but there's a lot of misconceptions about it. There's a lot of people that we are close to that might have different beliefs than we do. This is why it's like, it's an old cliche, don't talk about religion and politics, at the dinner table, because that's where it's going to be a fight. It's like, well, these are things that are very strongly believed in many people. And if you just go wholeheartedly into one specific thing and not question anything, and you stop seeking answers for stuff, you're putting yourself in a very small box.
And that was me.
Yeah.
That was me until recently. And
with the clients that you work with, and like you spoke about this with clients, what are those conversations like? Are you seeing like this kind of eye-opening thing from a lot of people? Is there a lot of skepticism? What are those conversations like when you started chatting with your own clients about this?
I'm really fortunate to like I remember the first retreat I held. I remember it's the last night, and and at this point I'm like not really into this stuff. It's the last night, and one of my clients asks one of my other clients, "Did you bring your tarot cards?" And I was like, "Oh fuck, we have to do this." So my one client pulls a card for everyone, and Mike, the cards like hit so hard, and everybody like the client who's pulling for everyone, this is like the first time she's meeting anyone, so she's just giving what the card means. There's no way for her to like do a deep dive on anyone because she doesn't know anyone that well. But each time a card was pulled and she's explaining it, the client is then looking over at me, and we're just giving like wide eyes to each other, because at the time I was working with each of these clients who came to this first retreat one-on-one, with the exception of one of them. And it was just crazy to like see each person connect so strongly with the card. And I think to an extent, if you want to connect to something, you're going to find a way to connect to it. But this situation felt like everybody got smacked in the face. Mm-hmm. So what was really cool is from that first experience, this stuff was already introduced. So I was not the one in my circle who led with this. It was more like I was questioning things with some of my other clients, and then having like these two kind of take the lead. And then from there, me and a few of the other ones started investigating this stuff deeper. So it's been a really easy thing to explore. And I think what's helped significantly is there's already kind of like a tonality with the majority of the women that I work with. Like, we're in chats together. So when I bring new people into the chats, there's already kind of like a group who is kind of woo-woo and talks kind of woo-woo. Mm-hmm. So then it's easier to kind of get a feel on other people to see like, are they into this? Are they not into this? And I have some clients and I'm just like, yeah, they're definitely not into this. So sure. I don't push it. But I think it's something fun to explore with those who are open-minded to it. Mm-hmm. And I think something that I really appreciate about myself is the fact that I was so closed off to this stuff for so long. And the experience that I have had has been so positive and transformative for me that it's easy for me to see both sides of the spectrum and meet the clients who want to go there, and meet the clients who don't want to go there.
It is. It's almost like a floodgate opening up a little bit, for you from one area and then going into another one.
I think eventually something you'll notice on my feed is there's definitely going to be a bigger shift over time, more into integrating this kind of stuff into the way I approach everything. And something we haven't even like talked about yet is the masculine and the feminine energy. Yeah. And that's something that I think is something so cool to think about and talk about. That again is something some people, they're just not going to get it. Mm-hmm. But for those who do, it's a cool topic to explore.
It is. It's something, and we, kind of started a framework on it, but sometimes these conversations just flow in a different way. So I go on with ages on energy. Going into that though, with the masculine and feminine energy, we shared, I told you about a book that really was impactful to me, which was Dark Side of Light Chasers. I got introduced with this by Luka, great coach out of Seattle. And it was something that I understood a little bit, but actually integrating your own shadow self into your own light, it's it's almost fully like hard to describe. It's actually hard to fully articulate the feeling that you get when you actually do these different exercises of actually exploring like your sacred self and um, infusing the things that maybe you hold embarrassing in your life or the things that you want to forget and actually finding gratitude or finding strength within those and putting it into your own self. That was one of the biggest things over the last probably 18 months that has been impactful to me. Have you shared any kind of specific things yourself in that type of work?
Mm, I mean, something that I think I've always been really open about on my page, like parts of my shadow self, like growing up, I had an eating disorder. I struggled with an eating
Mhm.
disorder for about 10 years. And everything came down to having a lack of control, and wanting control. And like that's where that came out. And I read this book that Mike is talking about, and I
Mhm.
remember doing one of the exercises, where you're, asked to visualize going on an elevator and going down to like the deepest, darkest floor of yourself. And you're, creating this visual of your shadow self. And your shadow self, again, it's the darkness. It's these things that you're like embarrassed to share. And I could see myself like, so I was bulimic. And I remember, in those moments where I would be purging, just staring at myself in the mirror, I would vomit like trickling down my face, and just feeling out of control and disgusting. And like that's something that came up in my shadow self. But where the light comes in is, if I didn't go through what I went through, it would be really hard to connect with other people who have gone through the same thing. And a lot of people that I find I connect to are the ones who have had a shared experience.
Yeah.
And I see that as light, to be able to connect with people on something that's, dark and it can be embarrassing. Um, you can connect in a way where somebody is, open and willing to trust you because they've had a shared or a similar experience.
Mhm. Was it easy? Is it easier in that exercise for you to visualize your shadow self versus the sacred self?
Mm, I enjoyed visualizing the sacred self more.
Mhm.
I loved going into my garden.
Mhm.
Uh, I think there were definitely components of the shadow self that were hard. This is like I've definitely been going through some personal stuff
Mhm.
where stuff has been coming in and out when I think of the shadow self. Um, so I think for me, it's been easier to have a clearer picture of the highest self, the sacred
Mhm.
self, over the full picture of the shadow.
Yeah. Does that surprise you at all? And the reason I ask is because when I've did this and if I mean, this is a little inside if you haven't read this book before, but if you haven't, I would recommend this book by Debbie Ford. It's
Great
a
book.
great book. It's a really easy read. But this experience is, as I said, like going to the elevator, you visualize like your amazing space, your garden, your area. It's very personal. It takes a while to get there. Like this is not like a short, like 5-minute practice, but I could visualize my sacred self a lot easier than my shadow self. And that honestly surprised me because I think it's so easy in a day to day to talk negatively about yourself versus positively. A lot of times the negative things that pop into our head, they are almost in bold letters because it could be biological. We could think of that as a threat that we need to, respond to versus the positive stuff. Like when people say you can get 20 people to say something great about you, but one person says something negative,
That's what you
you're
heard
gonna
about.
you're gonna harp on that for the rest of the day. So for me, I was like almost surprised I could visualize the of where I want to go, the sacred person of who I want to be, the best qualities of me, a lot easier than the shadow side.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you say that because, again, I think for most people, it's easier to talk negatively than
Mhm.
positively. For me, I wouldn't say that it was because like there wasn't something I wanted to face. I'm super down and open to being with like the dark qualities of me. I resonate very much with like that dark feminine archetype because I don't have an issue getting into those vulnerable places. Um, but for me, I think it's just because there's a lot of different factors going on in life right now where there's qualities I'm like taking in, qualities I'm taking out. Um, but yeah, I think sometimes for people, like if you really have to sit down with it, it's not just like, you know, doing my work. I made a stupid mistake. I'm stupid. I'm fat.
Yeah.
I think when you really have to sit down and be honest with yourself, people don't want to face the darkness because the darkness is a scary place. It's a truthful place, and not everybody likes the truth. And I think the cool thing about this book is showing that, yeah, you might not like all these qualities about yourself, but this is reality. And there's something positive on the other side. Through darkness, light will shine, but you have to do the work in order to find the light.
Yeah. What's your process of working through these things? Do you do this through meditation? Do you do this through journaling to explore these areas of growth? Do you do it through your own training time? Kind of what's your process that you work with?
Meditation for sure. I use an app. I found this app from not a colleague, from a client called the Chani app. It's amazing. It's like an astrology app, and I love it. Every day there's like a reading based on your birth chart. But I do a lot of meditations through there. I recently got into sound baths. I have a little sound bowl. That's like a whole other. I feel like there's just not enough time for us, Mike.
Yeah, I know.
But that, and then like I've been doing a lot, pulling the tarot cards and then journaling on them. My relationship with the tarot cards isn't anything like, oh, you pulled this, so like this is exactly what's going to happen. It's very much like you pull this card almost as a way to then tap into the subconscious and see, well, what comes up? How could I interpret this, and where does my mind go with the interpretation? So for a lot of this, it's definitely been self stuff, but also therapy. Having somebody to talk to, having somebody to talk to who is totally out of the picture, who's not, you know, going after anything for their own self-serving self-serving self. Not to say that somebody close to you can't help you solve a problem, but what I've found is, especially in exploring more of these like darker things, it's just really helpful to have somebody who might be a little bit more enlightened as to what certain things could mean from a sciencey, more of like a sciencey approach, especially since I'm going into everything from more of a how does it feel approach.
Yeah. I love that you really kind of closed it out with that, because this is such, first off, I'm sad that we have to close this out, you know, soon, but you know, time is of the essence. So we're going to have to do a trilogy of this to keep going. But you know, the message behind this of, as you said, like, see how you feel. It's like taking that time to actually see what aligns with you. It could be astrology, it could be tarot cards, it could be religion, it could be Catholicism, or whatever it is. It could be Taoism, of just exploring different philosophies of it. I think that, as I kind of said at the beginning of this podcast, of why I love talking to you so much, is because you're focusing on aiming up, and you're not being dogmatic in what you're saying and being closed out. Oh, this works really well, so this is the way to go. It's like, no, explore what feels best for you. And I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it. You could do it through meditation. I found it doing things like my kettlebell snatch sessions are like pretty much half a meditation, you know, in there. It's like just getting into the physical realm of that too. I think it's, you know, I think it's so powerful. So these conversations are honestly like my favorite to have, because it's just exploring these things that we all want to understand a little bit deeper and to gain a little bit more knowledge about. And I gained so much from this. I took so many notes of what you said here, Colleen, and as I said, we're going to have to just continuously do this over and over again. So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't want to stop the conversation. Now I want to talk
Yeah.
about like chakras and getting them to like fire up a little bit more when we're doing these kettlebell sessions. And I really do think that there's something powerful there between like snatching and connecting to chakras and why that can be so helpful from a mental aspect. I really don't want this conversation to end.
Yeah, no, well, we'll put this on a to be continued at this moment and go from there. So Colleen, you're the best. You're awesome. I really appreciate you taking that. If people want to follow you, if they don't follow you already, what's the best place that they can go and connect with you?
Instagram, my handle is I am Colleen Conlon.
Beautiful. Awesome. Colleen, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, go follow Colleen, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.